Boy, that makes better. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce our two speakers today, Phil Dawson and Laurie Rennie. Phil was born post-World War II of Anglo-German ancestry. He first became interested in ships during his early childhood in the city of Bahia, Brazil, through his father's work there as an explorer and as a passenger on several long ocean voyages with his parents and siblings. He moved to England first, then Canada, completed his schooling in Winnipeg, studied computer science at the University of Manitoba. While working with large mainframe computer systems in Canada and Europe, he also continued to follow developments in merchant ships and shipping. He started writing about these interests on a part-time basis. He left the computer field altogether shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, and he opted to pursue his lifelong love of architecture and design. He embarked on an entirely new photographic and literary career, specializing in design, operation, and supporting infrastructural aspects of worldwide sea and air transport. On the strength of his success in these ventures, he later became an associate member of the Royal Institute of Naval Architects in London. He's written extensively for various international shipping, aviation, and architectural publications. He's also written and co-authored a number of significant books on ships and ship design. The first of these books, British Superliners of the 60s, presented an in-depth design study of Britain's significantly modern Oriana, Canberra, and QE2. He later wrote the commemorative book, Canberra in the Wake of Legend, and at the end of her service career, co-authored QE2, Britain's Greatest Liner, with Bruce Peter and Ian Johnstone at the time of her decommissioning. And Larry, that's quite amazing background, Phil. And Larry, after graduating from high school, joined his father's footsteps and served a 5-year apprenticeship in a shipyard in Aberdeen, Scotland. He attended technical college during that time and then joined the P&O Lines as an assistant engineer officer. He served on a freighter for 2 years. In 1966, he moved to P&O, the Orient Passenger Division. And from there, he moved to the Princess Lines, where he served for 9 years, moving through ranks to chief engineer. During this time, he served on a number of ships and so traveled the world. Latterly, he was with the Princess Cruises on the Alaskan cruise voyages. Larry left Princess in 1973. He then joined Aviva Insurance in Toronto as an engineer surveyor. That position took him to Northern Ontario, the Dominican Republic, and Norway. Moving from Aviva, he joined an engineering risk management firm where he was retained by Lloyd's of London to inspect the Vostok shipyard in Mariupol, Ukraine, and Reliance Petroleum Company in India. The past 15 years, Larry has returned to marine surveying, where he still works in season for Profit Marine Services. Please give Larry and Phil a warm shellback welcome.
This is a advertisement for Laurie Phil and P&O Cruises. I think it's taken in the third. It's just an illustration of what ships are going to do. Another. So first of all, does anyone know what P&O actually means?
Pacific and Orient.
I've got it wrong. Princess and Orient.
Pacific.
Tell us.
Pacific and Orient. It's the peninsula and Orient. And this all came about because of the peninsula of Iberia. This is I am taken from John Mansfield's poem. He's talking about splendid ships, their memory, and what they really were like. It's a very nice poem. It relates to old ships. This advertisement was taken for P&O's 175th anniversary. This is one of the new Princess Cruises going into law. So they brought that about the press. So we have to go way back to 1837 when this all started. And really you have to even think about the Battle of Trafalgar and Napoleon invading the peninsula of Portugal. Spain. So there was a company called the General Steam Navigation Company, which moved people, ships, and the army well into Portugal and Spain. So they had to be supplied by these ships. This is the route that they used to take. So the General Steam Navigation Company was a very small shipping company. And, but they did have one thing going for them. They were allowed the mail contract from London down to Gibraltar. And that was a big thing in those days. There was three men who are actually the founders of P&O Lines. A guy called Arthur Anderson, Larry Wilcox, and Robert Moore. It's funny about this because there used to be a joke about Scotsmen and Englishmen. These are the big guys. So they founded the peninsula. They changed the name from General Steam Navigation to the Peninsula. And this is the sort of ships they were running down to at the area. Steamships with paddle steamer, but mostly they still had sails because they didn't trust the engine for a good cause. Eventually, once the mail contract was given to Gibraltar, these three gentlemen managed to secure the mail contract up to Alexandria. So now they have a ship sailing from UK, Gibraltar to Alexandria. One of the other things they were doing, P&O in the Mediterranean was they were trying to encourage people to do cruising in the Mediterranean. So one of the things that they did to encourage cruising, they got the writer William Thackeray to come on a cruise. And they gave him a free cruise if he would write about traveling ships cruising in the Mediterranean. So that's how it expanded. So now we got to the situation where they've got as far as Alexandria. This is before the Suez Canal was built. So all ships that were sailing on the eastern part of the Red Sea had to go down the Cape of Good Hope and come up to Suez, which is difficult. So instead of that, they had to decide, well, let's try and make this easier from Alexandria to Suez. So there was a canal from Alexandria to Cairo, and we're still in the 1800s here. And then so now we've got to get from Cairo to Suez with people. So how are we going to do that? This is just one of the ships that's in the Suez Canal. You know, it's in outside. In the 1800s, it's called the Acadia. It's the very first Acadia, and I was on the second one, and there's now a third one. So it still shows you with the twin funnels and the masts and sails. So how are these people going to get from Alexandria across the sea? They decided to, it's very difficult to see this, but they use horses and camels and they use caravans. And they took people on these caravans right across the desert to Suez. But one of the problems was the baggage was left behind in Cairo. So they had to get camel trains to carry all the baggage right across the desert the sewers. So now we have passengers and people piling up into sewers, waiting for ships. And you can see the picture taken on one of the ships on Sunday. Everyone sitting around the piano. And I just mark on the face, this is about 100 degrees in the shade. So you imagine women with crinoline dresses and heat, and they're just sitting waiting for ships to pick them up. Suits. So, right, so you know, I took up as far as here, and you got as far as here. But that wasn't enough for them. They decided that they wanted to expand the Far East. So they set up routes from Asia, India, global, right up to Hong Kong, Japan, and down to Australia. But of course, the ships that they had built weren't any good to do this. So, and the Suez Canal is still not being built. So each ships have to go here, and wait for the people, and then do the long trips of the Far East. This is one of the ships that they use for the student. The Michael steamer engines are gone, and we now have single screw engines with a steam engine, but still using sails. Once the Suez Canal was built, these are the sort of ships that they built. It's a twin funnel ship. It's called the Viceroy of Egypt. And all P&O ships were black with orange colored superstructure. So this is before the First World War. Now this is one of these ships. This is one of the ships going through the Suez Canal. Pretty much Suez Canal the same as this picture as it is today. You'll see some pictures of the modern ships going.
When was the Suez Canal opened?
1869.
Thank you.
It's a typical ship on the in those days prior to the First World War. And here's a typical steam engine, beam engine, about that time. Now we come up to the First World War, where most of these ships are requisitioned by the Navy, and all deck and engineering officers were all Navy Reserve officers. We all had to sign papers that we would serve under Royal Navy command at the time of war. And during the First World War, P&O lost very lot ships. After the Second World War, after the First World War, they decided to expand and build a whole new series of ships. Now, we also run into the situation with competition in the Far East. One of the competitors to P&O was the Orient Line. And here's one of the ships, the Orient Line, the Ortex. But this is another nice story of India, built after the First World War. And it was one of my father served on the ship. And this is one of the Far East of the time. The reason I'm showing this picture is because it was sunk during the Second World War. Here's a picture of the Viceroy of India sinking. Second World War. Two of the ships my father was on was subject to the Second World War. Luckily, he wasn't throwing them in the back. Okay, now we're after the First World War, they're now trying to promote P&O management, even the devastated during that very thing. Another opportunity taken on board ship. Someone reading the book and someone It's have a nice smooth that you guys was clear. From about 1930 to 1939, P&O built these 5 cruise ships. There was 5 of them altogether. And they were all built the same sort of side. It was very, very popular. This one in Colombo Harbor with all the gunboats trying to sell iron.
They built on the side.
Some were built in a clay, some were built in iron.
No, but
There was 500 total. A picture of the interior of some of those ships. It's a little bit dated, it wouldn't have the sort of furniture now. But this is similar to the Titanic furniture. What with lounges and smoking on it. This is one of the cruise ships built about the end of the 40s. And this is in Venice. And as you can see, it used to come right into the Venice harbor. That's now being disallowed because Venice has said no more cruise ships coming into Venice. Because you get about 3 of these cruise ships with about 3,000 people on board in Venice harbor. That's 6,000 people going ashore in one. So Venice has said no more. Remember, this was a two study taken about 1938. This was the Acadia, the second Acadia. Remember I mentioned about the first Acadia? This was the second Acadia, the ship I was on. This is taken on the Alaskan cruising. And it's anchored in the bay, and people are being shipped to crew. And most people who work down in Alaskan cruising would know about that. It's another ship, the Osura, which I also sailed on. This was the Orient line, as I mentioned, but P&O and Orient amalgamated in the 60s. And P&O took over all these ships. It was about the Ronte, the Acadias, and the Osura, and the Oriana. Now, once we get into the 60s and 70s, P&O has now embarked on what was called the love boats. And here was the Sea Princess. They bought a number of boats and they were converting these boats to smaller ships. They didn't want the huge passenger ships. They went into diesel propulsion. So this is one of the love boats. One of the first ones. And this is another one, the Island Princess. And I think there was about 6 of them all together. So, when they walked over these smaller cruise ships, they had an abundance of older passenger vessels which could still go back and forth to Far East and Australia. So what we're going to do with all those ships? So they started selling them off and just concentrated on the love boats. So about that time, when I was there wasn't much point in working for the love boats. And I decided that was the time to leave. This picture is taken of the Acadia and Glacier Bay on Alaska at the time of the amalgamation between Princess Cruises and P&O. Princess Cruises were a very small shipping company on the west coast of America. They had about 3 ships running up and down to Alaska. So P&O, in their wisdom, said, "Look, here's a market for cruising up to Alaska, but we need more ships." So P&O had the ships, Princess Cruises had the routes. So it made a perfect sense to combine the companies. And what happened in 71, the Acadia went up into Glacier Bay, and there was a ceremony with Princess Cruises. They flew in with a seaplane, and we had a ceremony on the ship where Princess Cruises and P&O amalgamated into Princess Cruise Boat. And this P&O pretty much ceased to exist. Today we have, I think this is the Grand Princess. This is coming into this year bed. It's the Star Princess. You will see how the difference in design occurs. There's much more smaller ships, much more compact, and they're all mostly diesel driven. This is in the wrong position. This picture is taken way back again. We're now getting to the Canberra. This ship was built in the 70s by P&O as a flagship, and it was designed for most people, get people from Australia, UK, and around the world.
The term flagship mean?
It was a flagship, was the biggest ship they had in the line, and where the senior officers were all. There was a senior captain, senior chief engineer, so that's why it was called the flagship. And Phil's going to talk about this in a few minutes. One of the things the Canberra did, we had this from UK to Australia, they had this immigrants scheme where they took people out to Sydney, Australia on a £10 sterling scheme. You paid £10 sterling and you were taken out on the ship, but you had to stay 2 years in Australia. Many of these people, we took out now, some of them stayed and some of them didn't. But this was one of the ships, this was the main ship that took them out to Australia and New Zealand. So I'll pass this over to Phil now to. Right? I'll pass this to Phil now and we'll talk about the design of the ship. In the next talk, we're going to talk more about working on the ship.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. The Canberra was P&O's last, the P&O Line's last ocean liner, truly built for transportation of voyages from one place to another. The planning of Canberra started in 1955. The ship was completed in 1961. And there was a lot going on then because the world, it's very, very prosperous time. Everybody was making lots of money and things were growing, and then people were emigrating a lot to Australia. There was a lot going on. Australia itself, they were looking to the Pacific Rim all around, Indonesia, China, Japan, Canada, the United States to expand their operations into these ports as well. So what P&O wanted to do was to reduce the voyage time from Southampton to Sydney, from us, England to Australia, by about 6 weeks down to 4. And to do that, they needed an increase in speed from about 22.5 knots, 27.5 knots on the 3 long sea passages to voyage. To those Southampton to Aden to Colombo, and Colombo to Fremantle in Australia. So this means that for a 25% increase in speed, you needed about 4 times the power from the machinery to deliver that speed. Once you get above about 22 knots, the requirement for power goes straight up. This means, of course, a bigger ship needed to house the machinery, nothing else. But the advantages are a big ship like this is able to carry a lot more passengers. Is able to do the voyage more quickly, so instead of needing 4 of them to do the service, you only need 2 of them. And as Laurie mentioned, P&O and Orient have been amalgamated, so P&O would build one ship, turned out to be the Canberra, which at that time had not been named. And the Orient line built a ship of similar speed specifications called the Oriana. Now, before she was named, the code name, among, or at least the name used among the staff in the office, they called the Orbustus, because it was either going to make or Bustus. It did make them. Canberra, as the planning started, the young naval architect from Triton Tankers, which was part of the P&O group, came in and he looked at what they were going to do. Oh my God, you need something more modern than this. He had been working on the design of tankers. He said, why not build your passenger ship more like a tanker, with the machinery all the way out the out end of the ship, so that you open up the entire center part of the ship for the passengers, for their accommodation, for their enjoyment and their use, instead of conventional ship design where they occupy the spaces above the engines and around the cargo hatches and the funnel casing, boiler uptakes and all the rest of it. So again, it was a very modern approach to the design of the ship to make optimum use of the space for the. And to accomplish that, very, very powerful machinery, which traditionally would be laid out with the engine, steam turbines, with long propeller shafts, and boilers all the way forward. What they did was they used a tanker style of approach. The boilers actually above the engines, above the motors, because they had the flexibility of doing that because she was the turbo-electric ship. So the connection between it was electrical rather than mechanical. So they had this sort of high-rise arrangement of machinery inside the ship. Now, what they were able to do was shorten the voyage time by a couple of days in each of those 3 long sea segments, and also to arrange the planning of the voyage so that you did not have the ship lying idle in port while overnight and that sort of thing. All port calls were to begin at 8 o'clock in the morning and presumably to finish, so that all of that handling could be done during a single steam voyage. It saves money, saves time, and it keeps the ship moving a lot more quickly. Now, they also used land-based architects, namely Sir Hugh Castle, John Wright, to style the exterior of the ship. So that you have this very, very nice form of the ship itself. And they used aluminium superstructure. Canberra had more aluminium used in her than any ship, including the SS United States. And what they did was they lowered the lifeboats, which traditionally right up to the top, they brought them down so that the weight of these lifeboats, would be lower down in the ship. And they called Canberra the ship that shapes the future. And indeed, it did shape the future because all modern shipping, they reckoned at the time that Canberra was about 10 years ahead of the competition. But in actual fact, I think she was 20 years ahead. Because in the 1980s, when you saw ships like Royal Princess, they were the first new cruise ships to be built with the lifeboats lower down and with a predominance of accommodation in the upper decks. Canberra was able to have an entire extra deck, probably this much, because of the aluminium, because of the use of aluminium in the superstructure, that would have been highly possible with a steel construction. So Canberra, we're going to be talking about it more the next time. She was a very, very successful ship, especially in the first 10 or 12 years of that service, when she ran out of Australia. Things got a little dodgy in the 70s when she made the transition to cruising. Cruising was something that had been foreseen in her design right from the beginning. And they made the mistake of positioning her in New York. The London thought was New York. The Americans had not seen the ship before. She wasn't known. And it almost came to the point of them deciding to scrap the ship. But other arrangements were made. She ended up becoming probably one of the most popular cruise ships that ever served in the British market. And she served right up until 1996, but she had a good 35 years career. So not only was she the ship that shaped the future, she also served in the Falklands conflict, where she was known variously as the Great White Whale and the one I like, Super Trooper. So I think is it beginning of January? We're going to talk about Super Trooper, the Great White Whale, and the ship that shaped the future. Thank you very much.
I'll just say a few more things about the Canberra. I'll go back to
The bottom. You get the mic, I get this.
Well, I'm gonna switch back to the. Okay, that's right.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, talking about the Canberra and the Acadia in different styles. The accommodation for the engineers on the Acadia was over here. See here. You got the Canberra. On the Canberra, because of all the space they had, we moved all the engineers accommodation
Can I just read that for a moment?
to the bridge.
Oh, we're gonna have a photo. Oh, there we are. Oh,
Okay.
brilliant.
So that way they can see it all.
If you hold the pointer here, I think that's my cabin on the camera right there. So a beautiful view. Of where we go.
Better than most passengers.
Now we had an elevator from here right down to the engine room, which started about here. And you still have to walk all the way to the control room. On the next lecture, we'll actually show lots of pictures with the camera and the engineering side. One of the problems with having a congregation out here, when something went wrong and the elevator was out of action, we had to run all the way along there and go right down the funnels to the engine. And that was crazy. However, this ship was a beautiful looking ship. It wasn't one of my favorite ships to work on, but it was a beautiful ship to sail on. And the picture you see here is just when Sydney Opera House is almost completed about 1973. And she's just leaving to go on a cruise. Could you move up a bit? One more. To sort of end the P&O story, because P&O has now become Princess Cruises, the only time you'll see P&O ships is on the ferries running back and forth from UK to France or Norway. They also have a very small cargo division. And you may see out sometimes containers with ships with the P&O flag on. That's what P&O stands. So it's all Princess Cruises now. So in the next talk, we'll talk more about Princess Cruises, the ships I sailed on, and what it was like to be a passenger, and what it was like to work on these vessels. So thank you very much.
Are there any questions or comments?
Involved in the renting of Holland America ships in the 80s. And what was into was, it was designed such that the first class passengers never saw the sewage tunnels stairs. Do you know that? Had you heard of that before?
The double staircase in the road.
Well, first of all,
Oh, wait, to the microphone.
first of all, we didn't call them steerage anymore, we called them tourist bus. So there was first class and tourist bus. That's that went out of the board by the early 70s, and it was just one bus ship almost. But as people serving, we prefer to go to the tourist class functions, not the first class. Because of more fun.
I prefer to go to the cruise parties at the top floor.
Same thing. Who's next?
You-
Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, so I was one of the very lucky ones we were living in Ceylon when World War II was on. I wasn't born at that time, but on the way back from Durban, South Africa, I don't know whether we were on one of the P&O vessels, but it was a military shipment of those who'd been evacuated. Every 3 years, my dad's firm sent us back to England to see the family. So I had 2 main trips back and forth, so 4 trips, all on P&O vessels. I remember they were pretty unstable during the Bay of Biscay, that they tipped so far over that all the chairs and tables and the piano went from side to side as the boat moved. Anyone experience that? And as a child, I was just so grateful to learn about bully beef to drink and a chunk of a bread roll of some kind and staying on deck so you got fresh air. If you went down into the rest of the ship, it smelt terrible, of course. Back to you for a minute.
You mentioned about rough seas in the Bay of Biscay.
I can't hear you.
One of the things we did was, when it was rough seas, we never put the stabilizers out.
They had them?
Everybody, oh yes, everyone thinks the ships nowadays have stabilizers, which they have. But the only time we put stabilizers out was when it was sort of medium type seas. So rough seas, they would just break off.
Okay, so they weren't strong enough. The other thing that I experienced,
It was stronger than the stabilizer. So we put, there was a certain limit of wave action where we would put them out and take them in.
the other
that's
thing
what-
I experienced even on the Princess out of Sydney was that they pitched and then they rolled. And that was the most devastating effect on the body. Right?
The Australian life for Sydney is notorious for that type of sport.
Yeah, terrible. We did the Pacific Islands, Nuku'alofa and Fiji and all those, that group of islands.
I'll be talking about that next time.
I also have been from, of course, Colombo to Fremantle, and then we were dropped off in Adelaide in 1952. Okay, now I'm not sure the names of the vessels. I did write one or two there spelled incorrectly, but one I remember being the Strathspey, or Strathair.
That was
Yes.
one of the crack ships.
Right. And what about the Multan? Was that one? Pardon?
That was an older P&O ship. All the P&O ships in Hindustani names. That's what
Okay.
it's called.
I remember having 3 Christmases on board ships as a child. I was 8 years old that time. And they had pigs' heads at Christmas time, 3 Christmases in a row, with lights in their eyes that flicked on and off. And I was absolutely enchanted with that for the dinner people. You know, when the parents went into dinner, we were allowed to come in and just have a look, not to come and eat. Children were seen and not heard, right?
Sydney at Christmas time.
Yeah.
I was only, at 12 years, I was only home twice for Christmas. The rest of the time I was always down here.
Okay, so you understand how beautiful it was.
Yeah.
They really went out full out when they decorated the ship. It was magnificent. So the first Christmas was to England, the second one was back to Colombo, and the third one was to Adelaide, South Australia.
Julia, can we? Thank
I'm
you
done.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments here? Ron, you had your hand up earlier. You're okay?
Couple of things I'll just mention, I feel we mentioned earlier. Right, P&O were expanding up to the Far East. They took an awful lot of single females. These young ladies were known as the fishing. And there was hundreds of these. When British troops were and people, civil servants working in India, they had no means of coming home. So the fishing fleet girls went out in mass, and they all used P&O ships. There's a book called The Fishing Fleet, telling their story.
Fascinating. Well, I'd like to thank you both for this introduction to the history of P&O and Princess Lines. And we look forward to having you back on the 3rd of January to hear your personal stories of being part of those ships. So please give our speakers a nice round of applause. And actually, I forgot about it because we're just getting started. You will get a token of our appreciation. Next time. Okay. And you may sit down now if you wish, and maybe get yourself some coffee. And next week, we have Margarita Pyron, although she won't be joining us. One of her, and she did tell me who it was, and I don't recall. But she'll be joined by a few of her participants of the Broad Reach program. Lots of people going on. And the Broad Reach program, the Broad Reach program is run out of this club. And I'm going to be talking about the program and its current status. And we'll have an opportunity to hear firsthand of the experiences of a few of those who have benefited from the efforts of this organization. It's a charity organization, and Margarita is the executive director. And this year, Broadreach celebrates its 25th year, and they will be having a gala at the Boulevard Club on November 18th. So you'll have an opportunity next week to hear all about that. And with that, I've said